Among history's most remarkable figures, two women stand whose strength and legacy still echo across centuries. Archduchess Maria Elisabeth of Austria and Archduchess Anna of Austria. Each carved her legacy across empires, navigating duty, sacrifice, and diplomacy in an age of shifting crowns and silent queens. Let us begin with the first, Archduchess Maria Elisabeth of Austria, who was born on the 13th of August in the year 1743 at Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna, within the Archduchy of Austria. What happens when a royal child, once thought too frail to survive, becomes one of the most dazzling stars in Europe's imperial courts? How did her early beauty charm kingdoms, only to vanish in an instant? And what secret strength allowed her to reinvent herself in the shadows of faded grandeur? Please watch my full video until the end, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Please make sure to share it with your friends. Thank you. Now, let us dive into the full story. Maria Elisabeth was the sixth child and fourth surviving daughter of Empress Maria Theresa and Emperor Francis I. From the beginning, she was watched with concern. Sickly and underweight, the infant archduchess struggled to retain food and develop properly. Her weak condition prompted doctors to move her away from the main palace to a quieter location, hoping rest and a new diet would improve her strength. She was prescribed warm chocolate drinks, and slowly, her body responded. In time, the once frail girl grew into a spirited child with a love of games and sharp humor. Her family began calling her Liesel. By her 5th birthday, she was known throughout court not just for surviving, but for her quick tongue, charming playfulness, and above all, breathtaking beauty. From her earliest years, Maria Elisabeth stood out, not just for her radiant looks, but for a spirited nature that could both delight and disturb those around her. Raised alongside her younger sister, Maria Amalia, the two archduchesses became inseparable partners in mischief. Their ayah, the Countess of Heister, often struggled to maintain discipline as both girls teased servants, ignored instructions, and mocked the rules of court life with gleeful disobedience. Maria Elisabeth's vanity blossomed early. Adored for her exceptional beauty, she quickly grew aware of the attention it drew, from noble visitors to palace guards. She was flattered by every glance and easily bored by those who did not admire her. Her mother, Empress Maria Theresa, observed this with growing concern. She once called her daughter a coquette of beauty, noting that Elizabeth did not care whether admiration came from princes or Swiss guards, so long as it was sincere. The young archduchess had little interest in studies or religious lessons. Tutors were hired, dismissed, and rehired, as few could handle her sharp wit and constant interruptions. Even her confessor was replaced after finding her irreverent and uncooperative. Elizabeth delighted in jokes and gossip, mocking courtiers and siblings alike. Her comments, though often clever, were not always kind, and many around her found it difficult to remain in her service for long. Still, despite her faults, she remained a favorite of many. With golden hair, striking features, and an infectious energy, Maria Elisabeth captivated the imperial court. Her childhood years, though marked by stubbornness, hinted at a complex character, both enchanting and exasperating in equal measure. As Maria Elisabeth entered her teenage years, the charm of her childhood began to reveal a more unpredictable side. Described by courtiers as eccentric and unstable, she often defied the expectations placed upon her as a royal daughter. Though she had been given the same education in religion, etiquette, and languages as her sisters, she rarely took any of it seriously. Studies were neglected, tutors grew frustrated, and Empress Maria Theresa became increasingly disillusioned with her daughter's behavior. While her beauty continued to be praised throughout Europe, those closest to her struggled with her mood swings and impulsive remarks. Elizabeth had a tendency to mock others publicly, sometimes targeting her own siblings with sarcasm and wit. Her sharp tongue spared no one. Many considered her behavior immature, while others found it dangerously unfiltered. At times, even fellow royals avoided her unpredictable company. Despite this, she remained lively and full of spirit. Elizabeth enjoyed music, plays, and operettas, especially when they allowed her to take the stage. One of her most famous moments came during the wedding of her brother, Joseph, when she played the god Apollo in the court operetta Il Parnaso Confuso, composed by Christoph Willibald Gluck. Her performance, bold and theatrical, was both admired and criticized. Elizabeth's personality became a paradox, admired for her talent and confidence, yet increasingly seen as socially difficult. In a world where royal women were expected to be modest and obedient, Maria Elisabeth seemed determined to write her own rules, even if it meant clashing with those around her. Despite the challenges of her temperament, Maria Elisabeth thrived in the vibrant setting of the Viennese court. Her striking presence and cleverness made her a favorite at formal receptions and theatrical events. Though often criticized by her tutors, she possessed a natural charisma that drew people in, and she knew how to use it. Whether walking through palace halls or performing on stage, Elizabeth commanded attention. She relished roles in musical performances, seeing them as a stage for her expressive personality. At the lavish wedding celebrations of her brother Joseph in 1765, she boldly portrayed Apollo, the god of light and music, in the operetta The Confused Parnassus. Composed by Gluck, the piece was tailored to showcase the imperial family's talents, but Elizabeth stood out with dramatic flair and self-assured delivery. Her performance was remembered not only for its theatricality, but for how confidently she embraced the spotlight. At social events, she was equally bold. Elizabeth often used humor and sometimes sarcasm to dominate conversation. She mocked trends, teased courtiers, and delivered biting observations with a smirk. Those who could keep up with her found her delightful. Others felt alienated by her wit, especially when she crossed the line into ridicule. Behind the glittering laughter, however, was a young woman still searching for identity. Caught between the expectations of empire and her own restless spirit, Maria Elisabeth leaned into performance, both on stage and in daily life, as her way of holding power in a world that offered her few real choices. In the world of 18th century royalty, marriage was never just about love. It was about power, politics, and alliances. For Maria Elisabeth, whose beauty and lineage made her a valuable diplomatic asset, the question of marriage began early. As one of the most admired daughters of Empress Maria Theresa, she was expected to secure a union that would strengthen the Habsburg dynasty. Yet as years passed, match after match fell through, leaving the court both puzzled and frustrated. When King Charles III of Spain was widowed in 1761, Elizabeth's name was floated as a potential bride. The idea of joining two great Catholic empires seemed promising, but the negotiations collapsed before gaining traction. A few years later, when King Stanislaw of Poland took the throne in 1764, another proposal arose. But this time, two powerful women stood in the way. Catherine the Great of Russia, who viewed an Austrian-Polish alliance as a threat, and Maria Theresa herself, who disapproved of Stanislaw's character and background. Even Elizabeth's cousin, Prince Benedetto of Savoy, Duke of Chablais, was considered. Elizabeth reportedly welcomed the match, yet her brother, Joseph, deemed it politically insignificant. By the age of 24, Elizabeth remained unmarried, a rarity and a rising concern in the rigid world of European courts. Each failed proposal chipped away at the future she once imagined for herself. Behind the court's elegant dances and royal receptions was a young woman watching her chances of becoming a queen slowly vanish. And with each passing year, the question grew louder. Would this celebrated archduchess ever find her place in the political game of royal matrimony? By the late 1760s, Maria Elisabeth's path to marriage had become a string of diplomatic frustrations. Though admired across Europe for her charm and beauty, she found herself entangled in politics far beyond her control. Royal courts spoke her name in whispered plans, but none of those plans ever reached the altar. The disappointment was not only personal, it was public and deeply humiliating for a woman raised to become a queen. The most serious proposal came in 1768, when negotiations began to marry her to King Louis XV of France. The idea was bold. Elizabeth would become queen of one of the most powerful kingdoms in Europe, and Austria would gain enormous influence in French affairs. A marriage contract was drawn up and preparations were nearly complete. The court buzzed with anticipation, and for a moment it seemed Elizabeth's future was sealed. But fate had a cruel twist in store. Before the final agreement could be signed, Elizabeth contracted smallpox. Though she survived, the illness left deep scars on her face, altering her famed beauty forever. Reports spread quickly, and the French court, so focused on appearances, withdrew their interest. The match was cancelled. Behind closed doors, many whispered that a scarred woman could never sit on the throne of France. The rejection struck Elizabeth deeply. For a woman so proud of her appearance and once courted by kings, the loss of beauty felt like a loss of power. The episode marked the end of serious marriage talks, and with them, her dreams of becoming a queen. Her path now veered in a new direction, not as a wife, but as something far more unexpected. The smallpox outbreak that struck Maria Elisabeth in the late 1760s changed the course of her life forever. What began as a promising royal match with King Louis XV of France ended in heartbreak and quiet humiliation. Though she recovered from the illness, the effects were cruel and permanent. The once celebrated beauty of the Viennese court was now marked by visible scars, and for a royal woman, especially one groomed for political marriage, such scars were seen as disqualifying. Rumors spread across Europe. Some described the transformation with pity, others with gossip. Elizabeth, who had long taken pride in her appearance and the admiration it attracted, now faced rejection not for her birth or status, but for something beyond her control. The French court, obsessed with outward elegance, quickly abandoned the match. The loss was not only a diplomatic failure, but a devastating personal blow. The emotional toll on Elizabeth was considerable. Those closest to her noted a change, a sharp wit that grew even sharper, a growing reliance on humor as armor, and a stronger need to command respect in other ways. She began to build her identity not around beauty or marriage, but around presence, performance, and personality. Her role at court shifted subtly, and though she remained unmarried, she refused to be unseen. This turning point marked the end of any realistic chance at queenship. But in the ashes of royal ambition, Maria Elisabeth began to forge a different path, one that would eventually lead her far from Vienna, into a world where influence came not through marriage, but through voice and spirit. With marriage no longer an option, Empress Maria Theresa found a new role for her daughter, one that preserved dignity while offering structure. In the year 1768, Maria Elisabeth was appointed as a canoness of the Theresian institution of noble ladies in Innsbruck. The convent, established 3 years earlier by the Empress in memory of her late husband, was designed for noblewomen who remained unmarried. It offered rank, wealth, and respect without requiring full monastic seclusion. Though she held the title of canoness, Elizabeth did not immediately relocate. Instead, she remained in Vienna, continuing to live at the imperial court. For a time, she maintained her usual presence at social events, banquets, and royal ceremonies. Her sharp wit and flair for satire were now part of her identity. Courtiers often found her entertaining, if unpredictable. But as the years passed, her role began to drift. Her once central place in court life was fading. Elizabeth was no longer the belle of diplomatic circles, nor the focus of marriage talks. And while her sisters, like Maria Christina, rose in status through powerful alliances, Elizabeth lingered, proud, observant, and increasingly distant from the political center. Still, Vienna remained her home. She hosted small salons, entertained visiting dignitaries, and remained close to her younger siblings. The palace walls echoed less with admiration and more with memory. Yet within those marble halls, Maria Elisabeth endured, not as a queen or princess bride, but as a woman gradually learning to live in the shadow of what might have been. The death of Empress Maria Theresa in 1780 marked the end of an era and the beginning of a difficult chapter for Maria Elisabeth. With her brother Joseph now ruling as Emperor Joseph II, the atmosphere at court shifted dramatically. Unlike their mother, Joseph had little patience for his unmarried sister's presence at the palace. He dismissed their salons, conversations, and social influence as distractions. To him, the imperial court should be a place of governance, not female-led theatrics. Joseph referred to the circle of royal women as a women's republic, a term he used with scorn. In his eyes, Elizabeth and her sisters represented outdated traditions. He saw no value in their continued residence at court, and by 1781 he firmly requested that they leave. For Maria Elisabeth, the message was clear: her time in Vienna was over. She was sent to Innsbruck to assume her formal role as abbess of the Theresian institution. Though the position held prestige, it was a form of polite exile. The imperial castle in Innsbruck became her new home, far from the glittering courtrooms she had once commanded with beauty and wit. The move was not taken lightly. It signaled a break between Elizabeth and the court she had grown up in. No longer a participant in the politics of Vienna, she was now expected to live a quieter, more restrained life. Yet Maria Elisabeth would not vanish into obscurity. Instead, she began to transform her new surroundings and herself into something far more formidable than her brother had anticipated. Settling into her role as abbess in Innsbruck, Maria Elisabeth quickly made it clear that she would not lead a cloistered, silent existence. The Theresian institution of noble ladies, though religious in name, offered its members privileges rare for women of the time: high status, private apartments, and freedom from traditional monastic rules. Elizabeth embraced these freedoms with style. The imperial castle became the center of her new social world. Within its walls, she hosted elegant gatherings, received visiting nobles, and arranged musical evenings and family receptions. Her sharp tongue remained intact, and her reputation for wit only grew. Though physically changed by illness, she now commanded attention through personality rather than appearance. She turned her quarters into a vibrant space where conversation, satire, and subtle influence flourished. Elizabeth never wore the traditional habit of a nun. She dressed as a Habsburg archduchess, carried herself with pride, and refused to be forgotten. Many in Innsbruck referred to her as Kropfert-Liesel, a nickname that alluded both to her smallpox scars and her increasingly plump figure, yet none dared mock her to her face. Her presence was too powerful, her comebacks too cutting. For nearly 15 years, she lived this unique life, neither courtier nor recluse, neither ruler nor subject. She stood outside the traditional roles for women in her position, shaping a space of independence that few royal women of her time ever achieved. Though far from the throne, Maria Elisabeth had found a throne of her own making, built not from titles, but from spirit and survival. In Innsbruck, Maria Elisabeth gradually became more than a ceremonial abbess. She emerged as one of the city's most influential and intriguing figures. Freed from the rigid expectations of court marriage or motherhood, she carved out her own version of power. Her wit, intellect, and command of etiquette made her gatherings famous throughout Tyrol. Diplomats, artists, and aristocrats all sought invitations to her salons where conversation sparkled, and no one was safe from her sharp but entertaining remarks. Far from Vienna's imperial center, Elizabeth developed a distinct identity as a patroness of culture and society. She welcomed musicians, painters, and poets to her court, encouraging the arts in a region often overlooked by the empire. Among her frequent guests was the great German writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who admired her presence and dry humor. Even seasoned diplomats reported feeling both charmed and intimidated by her command of any room. Though her scars remained, Elizabeth used fashion, poise, and fierce intelligence to turn attention away from her appearance. With time, the nickname Kropfert-Liesel, once used to mock her, faded into something more affectionate. People began to speak of her as a woman who had endured loss and rejection, yet never surrendered dignity. In a time when women were rarely remembered unless they married well, Maria Elisabeth reinvented her legacy. She may have been denied a throne, but in Innsbruck, she ruled over something even rarer, a court of her own creation, alive with ideas, music, and unforgettable presence. Though Maria Elisabeth had long been pushed to the margins of imperial politics, her influence quietly returned under the reign of her younger brother, Emperor Leopold II. Unlike Joseph, Leopold held a softer view of family and tradition. He respected Elizabeth's resilience and recognized her value as a public figure, particularly in Tyrol, where she had become a beloved and well-known presence. In the year 1790, when Leopold assumed the throne, he entrusted Elizabeth with a symbolic yet significant task. She was asked to ceremonially open the Landtag, the state diet of Tyrol, in his name. The moment marked a rare instance of formal political participation for a Habsburg woman of her rank. With elegance and confidence, she represented the emperor before the local nobility and clergy, reaffirming the Habsburg presence in the region. In the years that followed, she continued to appear at official ceremonies and high-profile receptions, receiving visiting dignitaries and maintaining the dynasty's visibility in Western Austria. Her apartments became a space where political conversations quietly unfolded alongside social gatherings. Though her power was not legislative, it was symbolic and deeply rooted in respect. Her reputation for strength, humor, and endurance made her a living emblem of Habsburg continuity. She was no longer the girl mocked for vanity or rejected for her scars. In the eyes of the people, Maria Elisabeth had become something far more enduring, a noblewoman who, in spite of everything, carried the empire's grace into a quieter but no less meaningful chapter of history. Even in her later years, Maria Elisabeth's spirit remained restless. Though her role as abbess was largely ceremonial, her personal world was filled with movement, curiosity, and vibrant companionship. Her circle of friends expanded to include not only nobles and clerics, but also artists, musicians, and writers who found in her a witty and generous host. One of her most notable friendships was with Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, whose admiration for Elizabeth reflected her sharp intellect and engaging presence. In their conversations, she was said to match him in humor and wisdom. a reminder that her influence extended beyond titles into the cultural currents of her time. She also traveled when possible, especially throughout Tyrol. Her winter retreat in Bruneck and frequent visits to the scenic Puster Valley allowed her a taste of the freedom so often denied to royal women. These excursions were not just leisure, they were acts of quiet defiance against the constraints of her title. Accompanied by her trusted chamberlain, Count Spohr, Elizabeth found joy in the countryside's calm, far from the strict choreography of imperial life. Music continued to fill her days, and she hosted evenings of performance and discussion. Within her apartments, laughter and argument often shared the same table. Her wit remained as sharp as ever, sometimes too sharp, but those who visited her court in Innsbruck remembered it as one of liveliness, unpredictability, and charm. In these final decades of independence and travel, Maria Elisabeth had become something rare, a royal woman who lived not just in duty, but in deliberate expression of self. The early 1800s brought sweeping changes to Europe, and Maria Elisabeth, now in her 60s, once again found herself caught in the storm of history. As Napoleon Bonaparte's forces expanded across the continent, the once quiet region of Tyrol became a target. In the year 1806, Innsbruck fell under the control of the Kingdom of Bavaria, an ally of Napoleon. The imperial castle, which had been Elizabeth's home for nearly 2 decades, was no longer safe. Faced with occupation and uncertainty, Maria Elisabeth fled first to Vienna, then eventually settled in Linz. Though she had long adapted to transitions and losses, this final move marked a painful farewell to the world she had shaped in Innsbruck. The elegant receptions, the steady rhythm of music and letters, the circle of artists, all had been left behind in haste. In Linz, she lived out her final years in quiet dignity. No longer surrounded by courtiers or grand ceremonies, she kept a smaller household and maintained her composure even in retreat. Visitors still found her witty, though more subdued. Age and exile had softened her sharpness, but never her pride. On the 22nd of September in the year 1808, Maria Elisabeth passed away at the age of 65. She was laid to rest in the old cathedral of Linz, not far from the river, in a city that had become her last sanctuary. Though she had never worn a crown, she had lived a life filled with influence, resilience, and unexpected transformation. A royal figure who found meaning not in rule, but in survival. Maria Elisabeth of Austria died quietly in Linz, far from the palaces of her youth and the grandeur of the Viennese court. Her funeral was respectful but modest, no grand procession, no royal fanfare. She was buried in the old cathedral, her name inscribed with dignity but without the honors of queenship or political triumph. For many, she had simply faded from memory, a princess who never married, never ruled, and never left behind heirs. And yet, her story offers something far richer than titles or crowns. From a frail infant to a dazzling beauty, from a rejected bride to a commanding abbess, Maria Elisabeth's life was shaped by resilience. She endured public rejection, private heartbreak, and shifting roles imposed by a patriarchal empire. Where others may have retreated, she redefined herself again and again as performer, hostess, cultural patron, and voice of wit in a rigid world. Though overshadowed by her more famous siblings, including Marie Antoinette and Emperor Joseph II, Elizabeth carved her own path. Her salons in Innsbruck became centers of influence. Her refusal to live in obscurity inspired admiration even among critics. She may not appear in most history books, but in her time, she was unforgettable. Today, she rests in quiet stone, her legacy scattered in forgotten letters, old portraits, and fading court records. Yet for those who pause to remember, Maria Elisabeth remains a symbol, not of lost beauty, but of lasting spirit. a woman who lived, adapted, and defied expectation until the very end. Let us now turn to another remarkable figure of royal descent. Archduchess Anna of Austria was born on the 7th of July in the year 1528 at the royal court in Prague, in the Kingdom of Bohemia. How did this delicate girl, once baptized quickly for fear she wouldn't survive, rise to become one of the most beloved and politically important duchesses in Central Europe? What strength allowed her to influence faith, culture, and royal policy across generations? And what made her legacy powerful enough to be invoked over a century after her death? Anna was the third child in a vast family of 15 siblings, born to King Ferdinand I and Queen Anna of Bohemia and Hungary. Her lineage was steeped in power. Her paternal grandparents were Philip I and Queen Joanna of Castile, while her maternal line traced back to the kings of Hungary and Poland. Her birth, though celebrated, was shadowed by weakness. Fearing she might not survive infancy, she was baptized almost immediately by Cardinal Bernardo Clesio. Despite early frailty, she quickly became her father's favorite, affectionately called his little monkey. This royal affection would follow her throughout life. Her parents, both passionate about learning and faith, ensured she was raised with a strict Catholic education and the humanist teachings of the Renaissance. By the time she was a young girl, she could speak German, Italian, and French, played keyboard instruments, and moved with the grace expected of a Habsburg daughter destined for great things. From her earliest days, Anna held a special place in the heart of her father, King Ferdinand I. While royal children were often raised with formality and distance, Anna's relationship with her father was unusually warm and personal. He affectionately called her Little Monkey, a nickname that revealed both her playful spirit and the soft spot she held in his stern heart. Among all his daughters, Anna was known as his favorite. This bond became even more significant as Anna grew older. Unlike some of her siblings, who were sent off early into distant courts or convents, Anna remained close to her father during formative years. Their shared Catholic faith and love of learning strengthened the connection. Ferdinand was deeply committed to protecting his children from Protestant influence, and he personally ensured that Anna received a devout and carefully structured religious upbringing. Her education was entrusted to the renowned humanist Caspar Ursinus Velius. Under his guidance, Anna was trained in languages, music, history, and religious studies. She became fluent in German, Italian, and French, a rare accomplishment for women of her time. She also learned to play the virginal, the clavichord, and the cembalo, showcasing her talent during court gatherings. Beyond studies, she was taught the refined behaviors expected of a royal lady, court dancing, formal manners, and the subtle art of diplomacy. These qualities would later serve her well as a duchess. But in these early years, they were simply tools in the hands of a beloved daughter, being carefully molded by a king who saw in her not just beauty, but potential. In Anna, Ferdinand had found more than a child, he had found a legacy worth protecting. Anna's early grooming was shaped by two powerful forces: the intellectual values of the Renaissance and the strict demands of the Catholic Church. Her parents, Ferdinand and Anna of Bohemia and Hungary, were united in their belief that education was essential, especially for royal daughters who might become political instruments of the empire. Under their guidance, Anna's daily life balanced discipline, study, and ceremonial preparation. Her tutor, the respected humanist Caspar Ursinus Velius, introduced her to classical literature, courtly etiquette, and the principles of moral philosophy. Yet no part of her upbringing was more closely monitored than her religious formation. Her father's unwavering opposition to Lutheranism meant that any exposure to Protestant ideas was forbidden, even punishable. Anna's world was shaped by devotion, early prayers, theological instruction, and a commitment to Catholic identity that would later define her court in Bavaria. As part of her development, Anna was also trained in music and performance. Alongside her sisters, she learned to play keyboard instruments, including the virginal and clavichord. These were more than hobbies, they were tools of refinement, signaling status and culture at every courtly event. Dance, too, became a critical part of her training, enabling her to move with poise and precision during official ceremonies. By the time Anna reached her teenage years, she was considered an ideal Catholic princess, learned, elegant, and devout. Her appearance at court functions impressed visitors and dignitaries alike. But behind her polished demeanor was a young woman being carefully prepared, not just for noble life, but for a marriage that would serve both faith and empire. As with many Habsburg daughters, Anna's life was shaped by marriage negotiations long before she reached adulthood. At just 3 years old, she was formally betrothed to Theodore of Bavaria, the son of Duke William IV. The arrangement, while symbolic at that age, reflected the early efforts to secure alliances and balance power among the empire's most influential houses. But when Theodore died unexpectedly in the year 1534, the engagement was quietly dissolved, and Anna's future was once again open to political strategy. Over the years, other proposals surfaced. One of the most promising came after the Treaty of Crepy in 1544, when peace between the Habsburgs and France led to discussions of marriage between Anna and Charles II of Valois, Duke of Orleans, the son of Francis I of France. The idea was daring. Anna would bring Milan as her dowry, while Charles would gain an influential Habsburg bride. But fate intervened again. Charles died of plague in 1545, and the plan collapsed. These repeated losses didn't just disrupt Anna's personal life, they delayed crucial diplomatic efforts. Her family now faced mounting pressure to secure a stable alliance, and each failed engagement added new urgency. Anna remained in the courtly spotlight, admired for her beauty and virtue, yet still unmarried well into her teenage years. For a royal daughter raised to serve the dynasty, these broken matches were more than missed opportunities. They were strategic disappointments. But they also set the stage for a union that would finally balance politics, faith, and geography. A marriage that would tie Austria to Bavaria and place Anna at the center of a new Catholic stronghold. By the mid-1540s, the Habsburg court had narrowed its focus. 2 potential suitors remained for Anna, William of Cleves and Albert of Bavaria. William had initially been given the choice between Anna and her younger sister, Maria. Though he chose Anna, political winds soon shifted, and the court redirected its interest toward Albert, younger brother of Anna's original fiancé, Theodore. The decision was more than personal, it was strategic. The Wittelsbach lands of Bavaria bordered Austrian territory and carried both threat and opportunity. By marrying Anna into the Bavarian ducal house, the Habsburgs could secure loyalty, calm regional tensions, and strengthen their Catholic network at a time when Protestant ideas were spreading rapidly through Central Europe. Negotiations intensified in the spring of 1546. Anna, her mother, and her sister traveled to Regensburg to meet the prospective grooms and finalize the match. Her father, King Ferdinand, imposed one critical condition: Anna must renounce all future Habsburg inheritance claims for herself and her descendants. This ensured no conflict would arise between Austria and Bavaria in future generations. Albert agreed, and Anna's dowry was set at 50,000 guilders, a sizable sum that reflected both her prestige and the importance of the alliance. Yet one final obstacle remained: Because Anna and Albert were second cousins, they required a papal dispensation to marry. An envoy rushed to Rome, and Pope Paul III approved the union within days. With the political chessboard arranged, Anna was no longer a pawn. She was now the queenmaker in a powerful Catholic partnership. Her life was about to change forever, and the Duchy of Bavaria would soon feel the full presence of a Habsburg archduchess. The wedding of Archduchess Anna and Albert of Bavaria in the summer of 1546 was far more than a personal union. It was a grand political statement. Held on the 4th of July, the ceremony blended religious solemnity with imperial spectacle, designed to project unity between the Habsburg and Wittelsbach houses. The festivities stretched over 8 days, drawing nobles, clerics, and diplomats from across the Holy Roman Empire. A few weeks later, Anna's younger sister married the Duke of Jülich-Cleves-Borg in a separate but equally strategic alliance, reinforcing the Habsburgs' intent to encircle Protestant regions with loyal Catholic allies. Anna's marriage, however, held particular significance. She would become the Duchess Consort of Bavaria, a Catholic stronghold vital to the stability of the empire. The religious dimension of the wedding was especially important. Because Anna and Albert were second cousins, a papal dispensation had been required. It had been granted swiftly by Pope Paul III, underscoring Rome's approval of the match. Catholic rituals were observed in full, with processions, masses, and blessings that echoed the couple's shared devotion. After the celebrations, Anna and Albert departed for Bavaria, accompanied by her brother Maximilian. Their first home was Trosnitz Castle in Landshut, where they began life together under the shadow of Albert's father's rule. But it was clear that both Anna and Albert were being groomed for leadership. As she crossed into Bavarian lands, Anna left behind her role as imperial daughter and stepped into a new one, duchess, partner, and cultural beacon. The wedding had fulfilled the hopes of 2 dynasties, but for Anna, it was only the beginning of her life's greater purpose. Anna's early years in Bavaria were marked by transition, patience, and preparation. Following her marriage to Albert, she settled at Trosnitz Castle in Landshut, a formidable residence surrounded by forests and tradition. Though technically not yet duchess, Anna embraced her new role with the quiet confidence of a Habsburg daughter raised for leadership. Her days were filled with ceremonial duties, correspondence, and private devotion, all while awaiting her husband's rise to power. That moment came on the 7th of March in the year 1550, when Albert succeeded his father as Duke of Bavaria. The couple moved to the Munich residence, a sprawling palace that would become both home and center of governance. With this move, Anna's influence expanded dramatically. She was no longer merely a bride in waiting. She was now Duchess Consort, responsible for managing court rituals, cultural patronage, and the spiritual tone of one of the most prominent Catholic territories in the empire. Anna brought to Bavaria more than her Habsburg name. She brought refinement, discipline, and vision. Her upbringing in Prague and Vienna had prepared her to lead with grace. She oversaw court ceremonies with precision, supervised the education of her children, and worked closely with Albert on religious and political initiatives. As the Munich court adapted to its new duchess, Anna's presence became a symbol of unity between Austria and Bavaria. She stood not only beside her husband, but also behind the growing reputation of Munich as a cultural and religious stronghold. A new chapter had begun, and Anna would shape it with quiet strength. As Duchess of Bavaria, Anna quickly became a powerful cultural force within the Munich court. Drawing on her Habsburg education and deep appreciation for the arts, she partnered with her husband Albert to transform the Bavarian capital into a flourishing center of music, painting, and learning. Their reign marked a golden period in which court culture and Catholic piety worked hand in hand. Anna's support for the arts was both personal and purposeful. She and Albert became patrons of the renowned painter Hans Meulich, who captured the likenesses of the ducal family in detailed, expressive portraits. Meulich's most famous commission was the Jewel Book of the Duchess Anna of Bavaria, a manuscript featuring 110 hand-drawn illustrations of Anna's jewelry collection. This lavish document, still preserved in the Bavarian State Library, testified to the Duchess's elegance and taste. In music, Anna and Albert elevated the court's prestige by welcoming Orlando de Lisieux, one of the most celebrated composers of the Renaissance. His Franco-Flemish style blended sacred and secular tones, perfectly suited to the Duchess's dual devotion to art and faith. Under their patronage, Munich's court chapel became one of Europe's most admired musical institutions. Anna also advanced scholarship and literacy by laying the foundations for the Bavarian State Library, a gesture that reflected her lifelong respect for knowledge and preservation. Her influence ensured that culture in Bavaria was not just ornamental but enduring. Through her vision and generosity, Anna reshaped the image of Munich from a provincial duchy to a beacon of Catholic sophistication. Her legacy as a patroness would outlive her, imprinted in music, manuscripts, and the soul of a city she helped elevate. Deeply rooted in faith from childhood, Anna carried her Catholic devotion into every corner of her life as Duchess of Bavaria. More than a ceremonial figure, she became a moral compass for the Munich court, setting an example of religious discipline, personal modesty, and unwavering commitment to the Church. At a time when Europe was fractured by the Protestant Reformation, Anna stood as a model Catholic duchess, both in belief and in action. Her piety was not confined to personal rituals. Anna gave generously to religious institutions, including the Catholic Abbey of Vadstena in Sweden, and regularly supported the Franciscan order. Her patronage extended beyond monetary gifts. She cultivated relationships with abbots, bishops, and reforming clerics, helping to reinforce Catholic influence across her duchy. Within her household, Anna ensured that religious values shaped the daily rhythm of life. Prayers were strictly observed, and her children were raised with a strong sense of duty to God and country. She supervised their education personally, instilling both discipline and humility. Her grandson, the future Elector Maximilian I of Bavaria, would later be known for his fervent Catholicism, a legacy rooted in Anna's guidance. In court ceremonies and public life, Anna's composure and grace reflected her inner faith. She understood the symbolic weight of her position and carried it with both humility and strength. Visitors to the Munich residence often remarked on the Duchess's sense of order, piety, and purpose. In an age of religious turmoil, Anna offered stability. Her life served as a reminder that quiet devotion could be just as powerful as political alliances, and perhaps even more lasting. As Duchess of Bavaria, Anna took her role as mother and dynastic matriarch as seriously as her political and religious responsibilities. Her marriage to Albert produced a large and prominent family, many of whom went on to hold powerful titles and shape the future of Catholic Europe. Anna didn't merely raise children. She cultivated successors, diplomats, and defenders of the Habsburg-Wittelsbach legacy. Her eldest surviving son, William V, would succeed Albert as Duke of Bavaria. Raised under Anna's watchful eye, William was deeply influenced by her strong faith and sense of duty. He later became one of the leading Catholic rulers of his time, championing the Counter-Reformation and continuing his parents' support of the arts and church. Anna's other children also made significant contributions. Her son Ferdinand became a prince of the church, while her daughter Maria Anna married her cousin, Archduke Charles II of Austria, a union that further strengthened ties within the Habsburg family. Another son, Ernst, rose to become Archbishop of Cologne, extending the family's influence into the spiritual leadership of the Holy Roman Empire. Throughout their upbringing, Anna ensured her children received the finest education, steeped in both classical knowledge and strict Catholic doctrine. She supervised tutors, monitored their behavior, and personally shaped their values. Her household functioned as a model of order and virtue. In her role as mother, Anna was not merely affectionate, she was formative. Her legacy did not rest only in institutions or alliances, but in the character and achievements of the next generation. Through them, her ideals would endure long after her voice had faded from the halls of Munich. The death of Duke Albert on the 24th of October in the year 1579 marked a profound turning point in Anna's life. After more than 3 decades as Duchess consort, she entered a new phase, widowhood, with quiet strength and continued influence. Far from retreating into isolation, Anna remained an active presence at the Munich residence, where she maintained her own court and continued to shape the duchy's social and religious life. As Dowager Duchess, Anna balanced mourning with responsibility. She wore the black garments of a widow, but never surrendered the authority she had earned. Her quarters in the palace became a place of counsel and continuity, especially as her son William took on the role of Duke. Though he was now the formal head of Bavaria, many still looked to Anna for guidance, especially on matters of religion and tradition. She continued her patronage of the church and remained engaged in the education of her grandchildren, ensuring that the principles she had long upheld would pass to the next generation. Her presence brought a sense of stability, anchoring the ducal court in continuity during times of change. Anna's widowhood lasted more than a decade, but it was far from passive. She became a living symbol of Habsburg endurance and Catholic grace, a duchess who had served not only in marriage, but in memory. Her dignity, even in loss, reinforced her lasting role in Bavarian history. And as the court moved forward, it did so in the shadow and strength of the woman who had helped shape it. Long after her passing, Anna's name would re-emerge in the political conversations of Europe, not for her piety or patronage, but for a single marriage treaty signed over a century earlier. Her union with Albert of Bavaria, solemnized in 1546, had included clauses concerning succession rights and dynastic inheritance. Though largely forgotten in her lifetime, these clauses would resurface in the turbulent succession crisis of 1740. When the male Habsburg line came under threat after the death of Emperor Charles VI, Anna's descendant, Elector Charles Albert of Bavaria, staked a bold claim to the Austrian and Bohemian crown lands. His argument? That Anna's marriage treaty gave her bloodline a legitimate path to succession. Though controversial and hotly debated, the claim was not without precedent. It was a striking example of how a duchess's role, once thought purely ceremonial, could echo through centuries of diplomacy. The fact that Anna's marriage, once shaped by peacekeeping and faith, now served as a tool for territorial ambition, reflected the complexity of dynastic politics. Treaties were not merely documents, they were time capsules of power, waiting for future hands to open them. And Anna's name, written in careful ink alongside dowry terms and inheritance renunciations, had become a living artifact of imperial law. Though Charles Albert's claim ultimately led to conflict, it proved that Anna's influence had never truly vanished. Her marriage, her motherhood, and her alliances had left behind more than memory, they had left behind leverage. In a Europe still shaped by royal bloodlines, even the quiet pen of a duchess could stir empires. In her final years, Anna remained a quiet yet enduring presence in the heart of Munich. No longer burdened by courtly expectations or the pace of political life, she lived with measured grace, surrounded by the traditions she had helped shape. Though time had softened her features and slowed her step, the Duchess Dowager still commanded respect within the residence walls. She continued to observe religious customs with discipline and attended chapel regularly. Her household, though smaller, was marked by order, devotion, and dignity. Anna remained close to her children and grandchildren, offering advice and comfort, a living matriarch in a lineage that spanned empires. Courtiers and visitors spoke of her as wise and composed, embodying the best of both Habsburg and Bavarian heritage. Archduchess Anna passed away on the 16th of October in the year 1590, at the age of 62. Her death, though expected, was deeply felt. For more than 4 decades, she had been a constant in Bavarian life, as bride, duchess, widow, and guardian of tradition. Her funeral was held with solemn reverence, befitting a woman of her rank and legacy. She was laid to rest in the Frauenkirche of Munich, beneath the cathedral's soaring arches, among the tombs of Bavaria's most revered leaders. It was a fitting resting place for a duchess who had shaped her world not with battles or decrees, but with faith, family, and steadfast purpose. In death, as in life, Anna remained a symbol of noble endurance, the quiet strength behind a thriving dynasty. Anna's burial in the Frauenkirche of Munich was not merely a ceremonial farewell. It was a powerful statement of dynastic unity and Catholic identity. As mourners filled the grand cathedral, they were surrounded by the physical symbols of the Bavarian and Habsburg legacy she had helped intertwine. The church, already a spiritual anchor of the city, became a mausoleum of memory, where Anna would rest beside her beloved husband, Duke Albert. Her tomb, marked with solemn dignity, bore Latin inscriptions and heraldic carvings that echoed the significance of her lineage. Through her marriage, Anna had united 2 influential dynasties, and her resting place reflected that heritage. The placement of her remains in one of Bavaria's most sacred spaces signaled not just honor, but permanence, a message to future generations that Anna's influence would not be forgotten. In the years following her death, Anna's legacy continued to be invoked in courtly rituals and public remembrances. Her image appeared in family galleries, her jewelry documented in the ducal collections, and her role as duchess was praised in religious sermons and historical chronicles. For the Catholic world, she became a model of piety and domestic virtue. For the Bavarian court, she remained a foundational figure, one whose choices and character had steered the house through uncertain times. Even centuries later, the echoes of Anna's presence remained in Munich's architecture, libraries, and traditions. Her burial was not an end, but a continuation, the final note in a life that had harmonized politics, faith, and culture into a legacy that still resonates in the heart of Bavaria. Archduchess Anna of Austria left behind no sweeping proclamations or dramatic upheavals, yet her legacy proved stronger than many crowned rulers of her time. Through quiet discipline, thoughtful alliances, and unwavering faith, she helped shape Bavaria's identity during one of its most formative centuries. Her strength was never loud, but always present in court rituals, in cathedral chapels, in the hearts of her children and grandchildren. Anna's true power lay in the balance she maintained between Habsburg grandeur and Bavarian devotion. She brought the intellectual and artistic richness of Vienna to Munich, and helped cultivate a court culture that would thrive long after her passing. As a patron of music, painting, and scholarship, she left a legacy not just of elegance but of enlightenment. Her deep Catholic faith served as both compass and anchor. In an era torn by religious division, she stood firmly as a unifying presence, a duchess who upheld church values without fanaticism and whose private piety inspired public respect. Her influence extended beyond politics and into the very soul of Bavarian society. Though her name may not appear boldly in the pages of mainstream history, Anna's legacy is etched in stone, sound, and silence, in the cathedral vaults that echo her prayers, in the manuscripts and music she fostered, and in the dynasties she strengthened through her wisdom. She remains a reminder that leadership does not always roar. Sometimes it endures quietly, shaping generations not with force but with grace. What do you think about Archduchess Maria Elisabeth of Austria? Was Maria Elisabeth a brilliant and spirited Habsburg, a woman of culture, confidence, and charisma who brought color and laughter to the imperial court? Or a forgotten soul, hidden behind palace walls, faded by disease, and remembered only through portraits and preserved letters? And what about Archduchess Anna of Austria? Was Anna a dutiful queen who brought harmony to the most powerful throne in Europe, quietly influencing a king, guiding a court, and shaping the future of Spain through wisdom and piety? Or was she a tragic symbol of royal silence, married to her uncle, bound by protocol, and remembered more for her losses than her legacy? We would love to hear your thoughts. Were these women silent shadows of royal dynasties, or their steady guiding light? Did their quiet strength echo through generations, or were their sacrifices buried beneath the crowns they upheld? History often hides its strongest voices behind the throne, but their choices shaped nations and their legacies endure. Let us know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales from the past, stories of courage, choice, and the quiet force behind history. Thank you so much for watching.